As a game, Space Marine is a third-person action game combining a shooter with a brutal hack and slash. But in essence, Space Marine is a power fantasy. If that's not immediately clear, just take a look at the main menu. You take on the role of Captain Titus of the UltraMarines. The Forge World Ajaxis is under attack by orcs, and the Imperial Navy is too far away. In order to hold off the billions of orcs from looting all the good stuff, they called in the Space Marines. 3 of you. 3 against billions. Honestly, it's not even a fair fight. The orcs stand no chance. Now after I've said all that, you probably fit into one of 2 camps. Camp 1 knows all about 40k, understood everything I said, and is likely bought into the game at least as a concept already. Camp 2 knows nothing about 40k, may be able to work out the gist of what I said, but not really the detail. And there is a lot of 40k detail in this game. It was clearly made by a team who love 40k, and were having as much fun designing this game as I am playing it. As a result, this game oozes 40k. Every frame really captures the Imperium like few games, outside of Dawn of War, had before it. While you don't need to know 40k to enjoy this game, the gameplay is solid and you can get the gist of the story. Having some knowledge will help you get more out of it. The game itself offers little to no help in this regard. It just assumes you know the setting and what's going on. A glossary would have been really useful to help newcomers get more into this setting. You can even call it the Codex, it was right there. Luckily, even without an understanding of the universe, you can probably work out what's going on. I think you can reasonably guess what a Space Marine is, for example. With that said though, let me give Camp 2 a brief intro to 40k. As a side note to all the lore masters out there, if I get something wrong or oversimplify some concepts, be gentle.
Serve the Emperor today. Tomorrow, you may be dead.
So, it's the year 40,000, and humanity has taken to and colonised the stars. Things could be going better. To start with, we were hardly alone in the galaxy. Over time, we encountered Space Elves, Angry Fungus, S&M Space Elves, the Zerg, Mecha Otaku, and Egyptian Terminators, all of which want to kill us in different and exciting ways. The Imperium of Man is incredibly xenophobic, in the more literal sense, and almost all encounters with aliens known to the Imperiums as Xenos end in violence. But it's not just the stars which are out to kill us. Hell is very much real and trying to break through at all times. We call it the Warp, and within it reside 4 Chaos Gods: Khorne, Nurgle, Sneech, and Slaanesh, the gods of war, plague, intrigue, and making the sensor work overtime, respectively. Magic is real too. Some humans are born as what we call psychers and have an innate ability to cast spells, which can be refined over time. The bad news is, all this power comes from the Warp, which if you recall, is hell itself. The good news is the most powerful psyker in the galaxy is on our side. The Emperor of Mankind united humanity by force many thousands of years ago. He knew about all the hell stuff before we all did, and has been working to save humanity from it ever since. To that end, he created the titular Space Marines. They come in a variety of flavours, from Mickey Mouse to werewolf. Space Marines are genetically engineered superhumans using the Emperor's own genetic material. Don't ask. They spit acid, have 2 hearts, super strength, healing, and much more. So far, so good. However, to cut a very long story short, after a family feud, half of these Space Marines decided to join with the forces of Chaos. The Emperor, after stopping them from destroying Earth, was fatally wounded and put on a life support system called the Golden Throne. That was 10,000 years ago. So, what is the Imperium like today? Well, as they say, in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. The day-to-day consists of the mandatory worship of the now God Emperor of Mankind and feeding the Imperial war machine. Mankind is under threat from Xenos, the enemy without, demons, the enemy beyond, and heretics, the enemy within. They've even set up the Inquisition to deal with these problems. Incredibly powerful individuals with a license to do literally whatever they want. What could go wrong? While the Inquisition deals with all the day-to-day problems, the lion's share of the war machine is made up of the Imperial Guard. See, worlds generally produce resources for the Imperium. However, one resource that everyone has too much of is people. Billions strong, the Imperial Guard is the meat grinder of the Imperium, throwing wave after wave of their own men until the problem hopefully goes away. While there are many more aspects and factions of the Imperium, there's just one more I want to cover for the sake of this video. The Adeptus Mechanicus, also known as Tech Priests. They worship the Omnissiah, which we politely pretend is the same as the Emperor. AI is banned in the Imperium for reasons. So the tech priests heavily augment their own brain power to become walking cyborg computers. Technological advancement is deliberately weighed down with sacred rites, runes and ceremonies, hence the priest in tech priest. The AdMech is responsible for most of the Imperium's high-tech weaponry and are quite the fighting force themselves. It pays to keep them on side. That's the general premise, and I know it's a lot, but with all that in mind, let's take a look at how Space Marine brings this dystopian hellscape to life. To start with, how are the graphics? Well, for a game that came out in 2011 and focused on realistic graphics, I'd say it holds up alright. Focusing on realism can make some games age faster than others as technology advances, but aside from some comparatively low quality textures and some sparse environments, I thought it does okay for being a decade old. It might have been better if the colours weren't so washed out, but this was the age of Gears of War. What really helps it hold up is the art style. Space Marine captures what a Forge world would be like really well. Every building is either a gothic cathedral, a gigantic war factory, or a tiny habitation block for the workers. You can get the feeling of what life was like for the residents of Ajaxus before the Green Tide showed up. You'll run into the Imperial Guard a number of times who've had a lot of work put into them to make them feel like a fighting force pushed to the brink. Seeing their fortifications and trenches sewn into the environment opposite the chaos and destruction of the Orcs makes the whole thing feel like you're in the middle of an active war zone. The sound really hammers this home too, from even your own footsteps to each and every weapon feeling really impactful. You feel like a pumped up superhuman orc killing machine. Just listen to the two most basic weapons in the game. The bolter. This sounds like it's supposed to, not just some piddly assault rifle. The bolter is almost an automatic rocket launcher in the lore, firing shells which explode when inside the target. Firing this thing feels like it'll kill anything it hits. Next up, the chainsaw. I feel like this thing speaks for itself, or rather roars. The music is pretty good too. It's more there for background ambience to give that orchestral, theological feel of being a divine warrior of the Emperor, but nothing that will stick with you long after you put the controller down. The main menu theme is a banger though. Oh, and if you listen carefully, you'll hear radio announcements telling the workers to get back to work, or that the manufactorum is having staffing issues, or things to that effect.
Be not concerned with events beyond these walls. Work, focus, meet your quota.
In the grim darkness of the far future, get back to work. Sounds familiar though, doesn't it?
Talk to your supervisor to see if you meet the requirements for this year's soul harvest.
Hopefully, we've now set the scene of the game. So let's get into the most important factor, how it plays. Much like the tabletop, Space Marine is neither a pure shooter or a pure hack and slash, but a hybrid of the two. Neither are incredibly deep, but complement each other quite well. You'll find that you need to balance between melee and ranged combat, because relying too heavily on one won't get you very far. The melee combat feels weighty, like you're really chewing through the Green Tide. Both the sound of you hitting your enemies in combat, as well as the gratuitous levels of blood that explode out of them, makes this feel so satisfying. Combos are fairly short, with the option to turn the next attack into a stun for a bit of breathing room, or for executions. You don't have a lock-on, and turning mid-combo can be a bit imprecise, so try a plan where the next ring wants to land before you do it. There is a small variety of melee weapons in the game, but each one does feel different enough to make you think which one you want to take into combat. Plus, once you've seen a weapon once, you're much more likely to see it again. Let's talk about those executions for a bit. A novel idea at the time was that if you got enemies to low enough health, or you managed to stun them with a combo, you could run up to them, hit the execution button, and finish them off with a canned animation to restore a bit of health. Sounds kind of familiar. Anyway, these look awesome, but you will be vulnerable during this animation, so it is a tactical decision. You have a shield, which regenerates if you don't get hit for a few seconds, but health only comes back from executions, so it's not something you can ignore. This isn't too bad, except for when you enter combat with little to no health, or fight through sections where there are no executions available. What's strange though is, loading a checkpoint refreshes your health entirely. I don't know why it just didn't regenerate out of combat or after encounters. You get quite the arsenal of ranged weapons in Space Marine. You always have a pistol with infinite ammo, and a standard bolter. You then have 2 flex slots for other guns you find as you go. While 1 or 2 feel like better versions of other weapons, for the most part, each one fills a different role in combat. You've got AoE crowd control weapons, and armor-piercing single-target weapons. Taking the weapons more suited to your situation can make some fights feel a lot smoother, though sometimes you just want to las cannon the enemies of man. It does fall into that trap many games fall into of requiring the player to know what's coming to make the correct choice, but even if your loadout is suboptimal, it's unlikely you screw yourself over completely. Speaking of variety, the enemy variety is also very good for fighting against orcs. You do get the feeling one of the devs had an orc codex from the tabletop and checked off as many options as they could. To start with, you'll be fighting orc boys. These are essentially here to make you feel like a badass. In a large group surrounding you, they can kill you, but they're mostly chainsword fodder. As you progress, you'll run into bigger and harder orcs that require you to think more about how you approach these encounters. Orcs also have ranged units to complement their melee ranks. Shooters aren't too much trouble by themselves, but neglect them and they can take down your shields, leaving you vulnerable. The rocket launchers... yeah, these guys can be a pain. Once you start to get a full complement of enemies, the game is slightly less power fantasy and more tactical. Sure, you can chew your way through enemies, but you'll want to think before you charge. For example, do you want to hold back at range and try and snipe some rocket launchers? What about sniping some of the more dangerous Scar boys first and relying on cover for the shooters? Should you run past the sluggers to engage the shooters in melee? Or will that just leave you surrounded or overwhelmed by smaller enemies? With a full complement of enemies, there's almost a kind of combat chess going on. But do not lose heart, Space Marine, for thou art blessed with the Emperor's fury. If things are looking bad, you have one final card to play. Fury Mode. Fury Mode regenerates health, gives you health on kills, as well as a significant damage boost. It even gives you a slow-mo mode for ranged weapons to pop off a flurry of headshots. If you do die without the Emperor's permission, then you'll go back to some reasonably placed checkpoints. There's also some pretty cool lore quotes from Titus, just to add a bit more to the atmosphere.
And we shall know no fear!
Most encounters have a checkpoint after them, but some set pieces have their checkpoints before some dialogue. Now, this isn't too big of an issue, but these set pieces are usually pretty challenging parts of the game, and may need multiple restarts to beat. This requires you to listen to the dialogue each time. It's a really minor point, but it did annoy me. I guess I just need to die less. I'd like to talk about the game's story and progression. I'm going to get into minor spoilers here, the sort of thing that you'd see on the Steam store page. So, skip ahead to the timestamp on screen if you want to avoid them. There'll be a bigger spoiler warning later for major spoilers, so you can wait until that one if you prefer. Those of you still with us, let's start from the start. Watching this intro again still gives me chills. I love how both the fate of millions of people and the deployment of some of mankind's greatest assets is just text on a terminal between two people. It not only sets the scene of how dire the situation is on the ground that they discuss nuking it from orbit, but how serious it must be to deploy the UltraMarines. The player is made to feel like a badass from the first minute of the game. The more I watch this intro, the more I love it. It's perfect. We meet our main character, Captain Titus, and his squad. They're trying to make planetfall, but the orcs have strong anti-air. So, the only sensible course of action is to strap on a jetpack and land on their ship. For some reason, you start off with a combat knife as opposed to a chainsword. I guess they wanted to save the chainsword to give it a bit more gravitas, but since you get it so soon, I don't know why you don't just start with it. You learn the basics here. How to do combos, roll, stun, execute, avoid grenades, and pick off ranged targets. The individual orcs look intimidating, but they are no match for a space marine, let alone a captain. We get a shot of a bigger and harder orc with a car engine strapped to his back, who seems to be their leader, Warboss Grimskull.
Get off my ship, Space Marine!
We don't fight him right now, but we will be seeing him again. Once we get to the gun, we turn it on the ship and ride it down to find our squad. Ain't no thing.
Captain Titus, come in. Damned orcs shot me off course. I've had no word from Leandros, but I'm picking up box chatter from Imperial Guard forces on the ground.
We're told the Imperial Guard are here, still alive and still holding pockets of resistance. So, we should probably help them out. On our way, we come across our first upgrade. All reliable, the Bolter. One thing I'm not sure of is why these altar things are here holding our upgrades. I'd assumed they were dropped in, but we see actual drop pods later. I'm putting this one down to video game logic.
Captain! Destroy them!
We meet up with Leandros, the younger of our two squad mates, and put our bolter to good use, picking off shooter boys we couldn't get to with just melee combat. Bolters have ammo unlike your bolt pistol, though there's plenty around if you keep an eye out. Ammo is mainly a mechanic to conserve resources per encounter, rather than over long periods of time, even on hard mode. We also get grenades here, which function as you might expect. Just bear in mind that the enemy get them too. After chewing your way through more orcs, you'll meet some Imperial Guard. You'll be working alongside the Guard at various points in the game. The Guardsmen themselves are way out of their depth. The lasguns they have are glorified torches, though they usually have a heavy weapon emplacement you can use. I always try to save as many of these guys as I can from the orcs. Luckily there's no melee friendly fire, otherwise it would be an impossible task.
My lord, you have saved us. Rise, guardsmen. You saved yourselves. We thought you did.
Once you've saved them, you'll get a bit of insight into how other people see Space Marines, referring to you as Lord and bowing before you. Space Marines aren't just dumb muscle, they're well-educated warrior monks with an air of nobility about them. Mark Strong does an amazing job voice acting Titus to give off this impression. The Guardsmen tell you of a lieutenant organising the remaining forces, so you decide to meet with them. You get a short trip through a bunker of wounded and disheartened guardsmen, showing you what it's like to be a normal human in this situation, as opposed to a genetically engineered super soldier. The little bits of dialogue here really make the scene.
I can't feel my legs.
I go to see a Space Marine before the end.
God, Emperor, watch over those who fight in your name.
It's these little details throughout the game which really takes the situation to the next level. Speaking of small details, as you go through the game there's a little incentive to explore your surroundings. Space Marine is mostly linear, don't expect branching paths or alternative ways to come at encounters. However, if you keep an eye out, every so often you'll find servo skulls. These are the game's hidden collectibles which have audio recordings from citizens before and during the invasion.
Personal message, Guardsman Alexander. I'll be quick. The orcs are beating us bad. We're completely outnumbered. Every time you kill one of the bastards, feels like a dozen take their place. And my mate Gareth. An orc chopped his leg off and he bled out. Nothing I could do. The officers are all dead. The second lieutenant's taken over. She's keeping us focused.
Listening to them gives you a bit more of an idea of what life was and is like here, as well as a bit more backstory as you go on. They're pretty easy to find, so I recommend looking for them. Sadly, I can't show you any footage as I found them all years ago, and once they've been found, you can't see them. Though you can still hear the noise they make to give you a hint when they're around. Next, we meet up with Sidonis to complete our 3-man squad.
Something to keep you busy.
Worry not, Captain. I've saved some orcs for you.
There isn't really mechanics around having a squad. You don't get to issue orders, but you also don't need to worry about them either. They're just kind of there. It feels cool to be fighting side by side with other Space Marines, as it should be in the lore, but mechanically they're just window dressing. Sidonus raises some concerns that the orcs are behaving strangely by doing such things as not looting a giant planetary defense gun for parts, but rather using it for its intended purpose. Titus thinks the big orc must still be alive as the horde hasn't turned on itself and is doing what man most fears: organising the orcs. Luckily, right next to the sergeant we get, as far as I'm concerned, the MVP of Space Marine, the Hell's Teeth Chain Sword, which completes our standard loadout. Now for some trench warfare to meet up with another Imperial Guard holdout. One of Space Marine's biggest assets is how it keeps things fresh and interesting throughout the game. Just when you think you've seen everything, a new weapon or enemy gets added to the mix. On that note, we have 2 new enemies.
Target that squig!
The first new enemy is a suicide unit called a squig, which will try and run up to you and explode. But if you can pick it off on the way, you can set off the explosion inside a group of enemies, which is never not satisfying. The second new enemy is a bigger and harder orc. Orc knobs are a sort of squad leader to the orcs. They have a lot more health and aren't as easily staggered like normal orcs. They hit like trucks too, so be careful in melee. To reinforce how hard to kill they are, their executions require a quick time event, as even on the brink of death they try and fight back. After holding off the orcs, you'll meet Lieutenant Mira, the highest ranking guardsman left after the rest got orked. Mira asked Titus to destroy the planetary defense gun Sidonus mentioned earlier, and it just so happens to be on the way to the Manufactorum. So, 2 heretics, 1 flamer. You see, the only reason this planet wasn't cleansed and purified was that this Manufactorum produces titans. Giant weaponized cathedrals on legs. They're pretty hard to make, so this is why the Space Marines are here to clear out the orcs, as they have a nasty habit of stripping them down for parts. You'll also be given access to Fury Mode. Kill enough enemies and you'll be able to activate Fury Mode and kill them a lot faster while also gaining back some health. As you go through the game, you'll get upgrades to Fury Mode to make it last longer and also give some additional abilities. For now, we've got places to be and orcs to kill. After a few more encounters, we're given our first optional weapon. The Stalker Bolter is essentially a sniper rifle. This game has headshot detection, so if you're a good enough shot, you can kill shooter orcs in one hit before the fights really get going. Even better when you get bullet time later. On the way to retaking the orbital gun, you'll come across an Ultramarine drop pod with an assault pack in it, essentially a jetpack. The same thing Titus used to land on the orc ship in the beginning, but now you get to use it in combat. You can only use your default and melee weapons with this on, so no Stalker Bolter. But you do get to fly, so that seems fair. With the assault pack, you can jump a short distance into the air and aim at the ground to do a ground pound with your chainsword. It can be a bit clunky. I felt like it needed to jump just a few feet higher to make most of the jumps I wanted, but it's tons of fun turning orcs into clouds of orc bits. And because we've not had a new enemy for 5 encounters, we get the rocket launcher. These guys are a bit tougher than shooters, and, as you might expect, have a rocket launcher as a weapon. These things are a bit inaccurate, but if they hit you, they can deal a ton of damage. Plus, they fire them point blank if you're not careful. When I talk about priority targets in combat, these boys are often top of the list. No sooner do you get the assault pack, no sooner do you leave it. Entering the tunnels to get into the defense cannon means there's no real room to jump without getting one hell of a headache. Inside the building, you'll be given the Vengeance Launcher, essentially a remote detonated sticky bomb launcher. I generally found it tricky to use, but if you can place your shots well with this thing, you can do some serious horde control. Plus, with the enemy variety available now, the combat encounters are really starting to mix things up. Some encounters the Stalker Bolter is key, other times it's not needed and melee is the answer. Playing on hard meant I felt like I needed to use all the tools available at the right time, as opposed to hoarding grenades like I usually do in these games.
Look here, Captain. Melter charges.
Put those in the right place, and this whole fortress will come down.
Titus and the gang decide the best way to shut down this facility is to explode one of the 45,000 caliber shells in the barrel. Having super strength does have its perks.
The orcs have pulled it out of sequence.
Then we put it back.
You'll also get the first set-piece arena here. These fights are tougher than average, will send multiple waves of enemies at you, and will require a bit more thought than your average encounter. gun decommissioned, the guard can resupply and redeploy. More important than human life, however, is the fact that you now have access to the rail platform to the Titan Manufactorum. As you might expect, the orcs are ahead of you, so it's all aboard the Greenskin Express. Another chapter, another new enemy. The Scar Boy is basically a tougher version of the basic melee orc. More health and more damage. However, on low health, they'll yell "Wah" at the top of their lungs and deal extra damage until killed, meaning you need to keep an eye on these guys during combat. Shoot down an orc flyer with a plasma cannon and we arrive at the Manufactorum. Simple enough.
What is that servo skull doing?
Trying to deliver a message.
Oh hey look, I did have footage from a servo skull. This one is actually a message from an Inquisitor holed up at the Manufactorum and seeking assistance. The fact that an Inquisitor is here is odd, as Sidonus points out. These guys are more of a scalpel to the Space Marines' hammer. Dealing with planetary invasions is not their day job. Sure enough, we learn that the Inquisitor is here guarding an experimental device, which can only lead to good things. Luckily, he's at the Manufactorum, so you decide to help him out. On the way, you'll get another set-piece battle and be given the Power Axe. I don't know the exact statistics on the weapons, but I think this deals more damage to armoured units as well as having a longer combo. By the end of the game, I felt it was a toss-up between it and the chainsword, but the chainsword sounds cooler. Give it a play though and see which feels better to you. As the game goes on, you'll be offered a choice of most weapons, ranged or melee, before major fights, so feel free to experiment and find your perfect loadout. Also, due to the checkpointing, if you do die, you often get thrown right back next to a cache of weapons to make that decision again. The Manufactorum itself is once again beautifully brought to life. As opposed to the war-torn trenches, this is the lair of the Adeptus Mechanicus, and the architecture reflects that. You get a good feeling of what the Admech are all about, seeing as their work is also their religion. It's a real shame you never get to meet any tech priests or Admech cultists in this game. I wonder if at any point there were plans for them, as I think they would have added a lot, but something's got to give. And there it is, the war machine you're here to protect. I just want to take a second to appreciate how cool this thing looks. While the Manufactorum may feel deserted, they get an A+ for visuals.
Inquisitor Drogon?
I am Drogon.
We meet up with the Inquisitor having a bad day. He wants us to extract an experimental power source before the orcs mess with it and cause Chernobyl times 1,000.
Space Marine! You try to steal my Titans? Steal my loot? I'll rip your guts right out your throat!
Unfortunately, we run back into the biggest, baddest orc who wants the power source for himself, so the race is on. The big orc has some weird boys to back him up, basically orc psychers. When you meet them, they summon a new unit, Ard Boys with shields. I'm sure there's a tactic for these guys since you get given the plasma pistol just before you meet them, but I always struggle and use the orc tactic of hit it till it's dead. We'll see the weird boys again summoning waves of enemies in a set-piece battle to secure the power source. Things don't go exactly as planned. We get the power source but are separated from the squad and end up in a sewer level. I'm not making that joke. Luckily, I don't think the game plays very much differently with or without your squad mates.
Well, I did.
We get the melter gun down here. This functions as an armor-piercing shotgun. It'll kill most anything in front of it, but it has a severe drop-off making it practically a melee weapon. Plus it has very limited ammo, so use it sparingly. The melter gun is actually your third weapon, so you'll need to start making choices here. Do you want to leave behind the Stalker Bolter or Vengeance Launcher? I leave behind the Stalker Bolter, as a sniper in the sewers seems less than ideal. We meet back up with our squad and go through a habitation unit. You get to see how the average worker lived, not well, and how the average human held up in the invasion, not well.
This was no strategy of war. For orcs, this was sport.
Then, in case you were worried about tearing through the orcs, millions more rain down from the sky in rocks, hollowed out asteroids with space engines glued on.
Marines.
I like the bit where the squad discussed that they probably could kill all these orcs, but it would take too long. We also get another new gun. Calm down, Space Marine, please. The las cannon is a beefy piece of kit. Like the melter gun, it's got very limited ammo. But like the melter gun, it dematerializes whatever you point it at, though this is a sniper instead of a shotgun. It's also strange, as most guns are side grades or situational, but this one feels like it's just a straight upgrade over the Stalker Bolter. Maybe there's some nuance, or the ammo count is supposed to matter, but I exclusively use this over the Stalker from now on. It's going to come in handy too, because remember the knobs from earlier? Well, now we've got rocket knobs. Bigger, badder, ranged orcs. If you can nail a headshot with the las cannon, you can one-hit these. And with the limited ammo, you need to get real accurate, real fast. The encounter design has the gloves off by this point. Expect to get a lot thrown at you. We meet back up with the Inquisitor, who tells us that he's been researching a weapon that he thinks can stop the orcs. The Psychic Scourge. Sounds safe. It's quite far away, so the squad decide to meet up with Lieutenant Mira to use her newly airborne Valkyrie dropships to cover more ground. After some fights alongside the guard, the Inquisitor is wounded and slowing the team down. Titus takes the power source to distract the orcs while the squad get the Inquisitor to safety. So, we're solo for a bit again. There's one melee weapon we've not got to yet, the Thunder Hammer. A slow swinging, high damage giant power mallet. So at this point we're given an assault pack and a Thunder Hammer. It's pretty good.
Six hours later.
Out of fuel.
So, after about 3 weeks here, or once you've accidentally killed the weird boys in order to progress, you'll reach another guard outpost. You even get to see some of their tanks, but sadly they're just set dressing. From here, you ditch the assault pack and board the Valkyrie. What follows is a turret section where you need to shoot down Storm Boys. This is their only appearance in the game, and I'm pretty sure it's because they look cool and the designers wanted to get as much of the Orc Codex in the game as they could. This section is actually tricky though, as you have no cover, no mobility, and no way to recover health. On hard it kinda sucked, but it was a nice idea and it's quite short. It's also weird to see a lot of the other Valkyries around you being shot down. You know, I hate the trope where you're in a plane or ship and everything around you blows up, but you just so happen to be in the one that... Yeah, never mind. After a short fight, you ride another Valkyrie and meet the Inquisitor. He takes you to his research facility through the sewer pipes, still not doing it. You have to kill the automated terrorists without being able to regenerate any health. But again, dying fills up your health, so why you can't heal, I don't know. Luckily, I think this is the last section like this. You get a permanent upgrade to your standard bolter, which does more damage and has more armor piercing. It's always nice to get these permanent upgrades throughout the game. Then, you fight your way up to the Inquisitor's research tower.
Firing now.
Okay, now we get to the major spoiler warning. If you like what you see and you want to play this game, then stop the video now or skip to the timestamp on the screen. You have been warned.
I've been looking for you, Space Marine!
Why didn't it work?
Damn that Drogon! Never trust the Inquisition!
Stand fast, UltraMarines. We can handle a few orcs. Space Marine! Was that supposed to hurt?
Chaos demons! How is this possible?
You got new friends now, Space Marine!
Yeah, so Chaos are in the game too. I've deliberately neglected to mention the entire second faction of enemies because the devs committed to this, so I should too. There's no mention of the Chaos faction in any of the marketing on Steam other than in the multiplayer. When I first played this, I had no idea they were going to turn up. I even thought I was near the end of the game, but nope. Turns out Drogon was a literal puppet for the Chaos Lord Nemeroth. It was his plan all along to open a warp portal which would allow Chaos through to get their hands on the Titan for themselves. See, I also skipped over the fact that the power source is a warp conduit. The squad were less than thrilled at this revelation. Also, back when you fought the Weird Boy attack waves, Titus held the power source without any protection and it didn't turn him into a fine purple mist. This must mean that he is somehow resistant to the warp, and in 40k, being different, especially when it comes to the warp, is heresy. Something Leandros is less than thrilled about. This comes into play now though, as whatever this power is, it lets him resist the Chaos Lord long enough for the biggest, baddest orc to come back and jump off a ledge with them.
I ain't so easy to kill.
So, let's fight Chaos. First off, you'll be attacked by Bloodletters, the only full-on demon we'll see. Bloodletters are demons of Khorne, the Chaos God of War, not that one, and live only to fight and kill. They hit pretty hard and can dash out of the way of ranged weapons or even behind you. The worst part is, when they die, they still have their collision, so you can get stuck on them. Watch out for that. Next, we'll see Renegade Guardsmen. They act like the guard you've seen before, with the exception their weapons seem to actually do damage in large enough numbers. We also get to meet our first Chaos Space Marines. The Havocs with plasma cannons fire arching plasma projectiles which explode on impact for huge damage. Like the Rocket Boys, be careful as you charge them because they can unload at point blank and kill you. A neat tidbit about most Chaos enemies, they don't die when you fight them, instead they teleport back into the warp. The squad have a bit of a chat about accidentally causing a Chaos invasion. Titus believes that the Inquisitor from the Servo Skull message was the real deal, but by the time you got to him, he'd been replaced by Nemeroth's puppet. If you're keen-eyed and collect the audio logs, you can get the full story here. It turns out the Inquisitor did something they teach you not to do on the first day of Psycho School. Listen to voices in the warp offering you great power. Long story short, this was Chaos's plan all along, before Drogon even set up his facility. The more he played around in the warp, the closer and closer a demon came to breaking into reality and possessing him.
Lock it down! A demon is in the labs!
After you come out of the facility, you'll be confronted with the Spire bathing the whole game in a purple light as the line between reality and the warp weakens. Titus and the squad decide the best course of action is to blow up the tower powering the warp gate. The best thing for that job just so happens to be back in the Manufactorum, and we've got its power source.
It's time we use the power source to our advantage. To supercharge Invictus.
After picking up a permanent upgrade to your shield, you come across a battle between the Orcs and Chaos. This is another one of those little scenes that I love. It's just so cool to watch them fight, and it lets the player know that just because both these threats hate humanity, it doesn't mean they get along. Plus, as you go on, you see less and less Orc resistance, presumably as Chaos deals with them. I guess this technically solves the Orc invasion problem, the same way releasing wave after wave of needle snakes solves your tree lizard problem. We get the plasma gun next. I always find plasma a bit clunky to use in this game due to the overheat mechanics, so I don't really use it. But it's essentially a plasma assault rifle, which is good against armoured targets. Speaking of armoured targets, more Orcs actually. You meet up with the already spread thin guard holding out against the Orcs, including some newly armoured Orc knobs, which are even harder to kill. The guard needs you to power up some sentry guns to hold off the orcs to, quite frankly, not just die outright. You gladly oblige and face some of the hardest orc waves in the game. Once you restore power though, you'll see the orcs cut down and the guard secured. Now it's back off to the Manufactorum in order to stop this invasion. Oh wait, no it's not.
You can walk out of here with that sparkle thing. I'm Boss Grimskull! This whole planet is mine!
Warboss Grimskull is here and he wants your sparkly thing for no other reason than it's shiny. It's finally time for you and this guy to go one-on-one, and it's a pretty satisfying boss fight. He's tough, he's fast, and he can break down walls which more boys will pour in from. He is the boss after all. On top of that, he can throw multiple grenades at you, as well as being equipped with a machine gun and rocket launcher. In phase 2, he'll jump to a higher platform and let his minions take you on while firing down on you. You even have to deal with squigs in this phase on top of everything else.
I ain't finished with you yet, Space Marine! But I am finished with you, Orc.
Once victorious, the orcs become fractured. Between this and Chaos, you won't be seeing many more. We meet up with the squad and need to get to the Manufactorum, and the Titan, in a hurry. Upon arrival, we are greeted by the Titan's crew. They've already mobilized and are ready to go, but the Titan essentially still has the safety on. It's up to us to free Invictus from its mirroring clamps and get the power source to them to supercharge its weaponry. But there's a lot of chaos between us and that. Just as a note though, this game has a really good variety of enemies. I managed to pace them out or mix up the compositions really well. Hats off to the design team. Havoc Chaos Space Marines now come equipped with the las cannon, and, much like yours, they hit like trucks, so try to las cannon them first. We'll also see standard Chaos Space Marines. They have a bolter and a chain axe, as well as a regenerating shield. These guys are tough, as they are essentially a mirror to the player. One is fine to deal with, but two, backed up with guard, can tear through you very quickly. Then there's the Chosen.
I will feed you to the dark gods myself, UltraMarine.
Imagine if the Chaos Marines were essentially the Chaos version of the Orc Boy. The Chosen is the big knob. These guys have a huge shield that can withstand multiple melter shots and hit like trucks. Throw everything and the kitchen sink at these guys.
If a job is worth doing, it's worth dying.
On to the Titan. If you, like me, couldn't wait to ride the Titan, well here we go. Though you do literally ride it. I suppose it wouldn't really have worked to actually control the Titan. You have to fight a lot of small enemies and the weapons are used to level cities or opposing Titans. Though it's still a bit sad you don't get to actually pull the trigger. As you defend the Titan from these Half-Life 2 gunship things, you'll also be attacked by tainted psychers. I like the idea of these guys, but their warp lightning on hard does insane damage and they have a pretty beefy psychic shield for you to get through. Chaos is no joke. The portion of the game against the orcs was mostly to make you feel like a super-powered, badass killing machine, which it does to be fair. With Chaos, these guys are on your level. They can kill you quick, are tough, and hit hard. The game becomes much more tactical and you really need to slow down as you approach these encounters, where before you could just charge in. If you don't, you'll see your health bar melt like never before. I died a lot during these sections. I think the difficulty works here though, as it plays into the mood shift of things really getting out of hand.
Serve the Emperor today. Tomorrow, you may be dead.
Power source successfully destroyed.
Target the orbital spire.
You eventually get Titan Invictus moving, in position, and boom, the spire is down. Kind of. It stays in place, I assume because it looks cool, but it's probably because of the warp energy. While this doesn't send back all the demons here, it does shut down the link to the warp itself. So, things can't get worse, per se. Now, it's time to take down Nemeroth, so we request a Valkyrie to the spire. Titus decides it's not a good idea to take the power source right to the Chaos Lord himself, so gives it to Sidonus to secure. By himself. No prizes for guessing how this goes. Sidonus is left alone for 5 minutes and Nemeroth teleports in behind him for backstab damage. This one's on Titus. What did he think would happen? Nemeroth, like all good villains, lets us know he wants to use the power source to become a demon. Once again, he uses warp powers to stop Titus, who manages to resist him to a point. Nemeroth taunts Titus by saying he must be warp touched to be able to do such a thing, and calls him brother as he leaves. Now my lore isn't 100% on this, but there are reasons why humans are warp resistant outside of being tainted by it. I'm not sure if Titus knows this, or if Nemeroth is just messing with him. Either way, it's the sort of thing the Imperium would lock you in a room with lots of needles inside to find out which one it was. Space Marine has done well, but we finally get our last upgrade. It's not the best unfortunately, but it is pretty fun. The Storm Bolter is basically two bolters glued together. Not much more to say about this, other than that the ammo pool isn't doubled, so it runs out quite fast. It's fun for a bit and sounds great, but I tend to use the Melter and Las Cannon when I have enough ammo from here on out. Chaos also has one last trick to throw at the player before we're through. When you kill specific Renegade Guardsmen, they explode into bloodletters. This only happens in a few instances, which is a shame because I think putting one or two of these in all encounters going forward would really add an element of tension when you mow down the weakest enemies. It's still a neat idea though, and very Chaos. We head towards the Spire and meet up with some red Space Marines, the Blood Ravens. Space Marines come in regiments called chapters, each has their own law, customs and colour schemes. Assumingly due to the escalating situation, those guys on Messenger in the intro decided a few more squads of Space Marines to stop a full-scale invasion from hell was a good idea. It's a fun little section as you get to fight with a few Blood Ravens across the bridge to an Ultramarine Thunderhawk, their version of a Valkyrie. One thing I never really understood in Space Marine is if you are the only Ultramarines on the ground or not. You occasionally get voice lines to imply there's at least some Ultramarine support in the area, or at least in orbit, but never much clarification. Well, the Thunderhawk is here now, and ready to take you to the final stage. This one is tough. You get a little bit of a treat before it gets really hard though. Good old Thundy and Jumpy. No respawning enemies this time, which is probably for the best. Time to turn the ones here into demon dust. You run out of fuel halfway up and get a full choice of weapons before the final fight with Nemeroth. When you reach the top of the spire, Nemeroth is using the power source to try once again to bring chaos into the world and to be blessed by his gods into ascending into demonhood.
You want to talk to your gods? I will send you to them. Nothing you say can tempt me from the path of honor, or from avenging the deaths of my battle brothers.
Titus is having none of it, and the fight is on. Against enemies, that is. Nemeroth himself is protected behind a shield and sends wave after wave of Chaos Warriors, including 2 champions at you. By the time they're dealt with, the demification is complete, setting up the final, ultimate boss fight of the game. Demonic Chaos Lord versus warp-resistant Ultramarine Captain, and it's a quick time event. Titus knocks Nemeroth off the spire, and as they fall down, punches him in the face a lot with quick time events. It's such a shame the war boss fight was so good, and this is the final fight of the game. I almost wonder if they ran out of time, or if they just couldn't think of how better to do it. I guess it looks cool, but that's about it. After Titus headbutts Nemeroth to death, he destroys the power source, and the secrets it holds, once and for all. The sky clears, and a Valkyrie swoops in to catch Titus as he falls. Lieutenant Mira is here to thank Titus for saving this world, and everything is looking great. Then we get another Valkyrie with an eye painted on the side. Stop right there! LAPD! Turns out Leandros was actually quite worried about all that warp resistance, summoning demons, and being called brother by a Chaos Lord, and has ratted him out to the Inquisition. Now, Leandros is painted as the bad guy here, but hear me out. This is what he's supposed to do in the lore. If Titus is corrupted by chaos, knowingly or not, it needs to be looked into. Chaos spreads through humanity like a rot. People may not know they are corrupted, but can still spread that corruption until something like the Chaos Invasion we just saw happens.
The Inquisition will destroy you, Mira, and the UltraMarines will be forever dishonored.
So, Titus submits to Inquisitor Thrax in order to find out why he is resistant to the warp.
I do not know why I can resist the touch of chaos, but I swear I will discover the truth. we will discover many truths, Space Marine.
And that's the last we've seen of him. Space Marine sets up for a sequel that never happens. We're still in the spoiler section here, so I won't go into too much detail yet, but suffice to say, at the time of recording, Captain Titus is still in inquisitorial custody. One second, just give me a sec. Hello? Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Ah. Alright, yeah. Well, no, yeah. I'll let them know. Okay. Okay? Okay, bye. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so Space Marine 2. So, that's Space Marine. Overall, a decade-old game which still occupies a niche not really explored much since. We have hired gun now for on the ground 40k, but not too much else. If you want a hack and slasher, you can do a lot worse, but if you want a Warhammer 40k game, little compares. The combat isn't as deep as, say, Devil May Cry or other spectacle fighters, but that's not what it's trying to be. It's trying to be an on-the-ground super soldier simulator, and it nails that feeling. Before Doom 2016 came along, when the devs had finished playing this, it had some of the crunchiest combat going, and it's still so much fun. Space Marine takes about 6 to 8 hours to beat in the single player campaign. There isn't really much replay value outside of the difficulty modes, but it's a really fun playthrough, and to be fair, I played this when it came out and had just as much fun 10 years later as I did the first time. There is a multiplayer mode which is surprisingly good. A lot of games at the time, and kinda to this day, have shoehorned in multiplayer modes, but this one surprised a lot of people. It's very hard to find games naturally, and the people playing are usually very good, but there are communities out there if you want to play it. Or, if you can get a group of friends together, you can form a private lobby. The game did set up for a sequel which never really happened. However, it took me so long to make this video that they made a whole game in the meantime. After a decade of rumours, we're finally getting Space Marine 2. I was worried that it had been so long that they would just scrap the story and start again, but it looks like we'll be continuing where Space Marine 1 left off. Sadly, Mark Strong won't be returning, but so long as the gameplay is even close to the original, it'll be something to look forward to. Now, to get to the price. I was going to say that this game was £20 or $30, but while writing this script, the Space Marine 10th anniversary came out, which is the base game, along with all the multiplayer DLC. If you already had Space Marine, you got this upgrade for free, which is nice. However, they also doubled the price to £40, and you can't buy the base game without the DLC anymore. A lot of people, me included, were happy to see Space Marine get some love 10 years down the line, but essentially doubling the price for new players is not the love I wanted to see. When it first came out, it was on sale at 66% off, and that's a decent price at around £14 or $20, Warhammer fan or not. Plus, I've seen people say that this was the game that got them into Warhammer in the first place, so this could be your jumping on point. I apologise to your work when you don't sleep from staying up all night reading wiki articles. Thanks for watching everyone. This video kind of got away from me and took way longer than I had planned. It's kind of a new experience for me, so any feedback is greatly appreciated. I hope it turned out well. This game deserved it. And a big thanks to everyone who helped me out on this video. You know who you are. I have a few ideas of what to do next, definitely shorter videos. many reviews, both new games and old, but also a few other ideas if they pan out. Basically, I've got more ideas of what I want to do than time, so I'm just going where the wind takes me. If you're new here or returning, make sure to do maximum engagement to feed the algorithm, such as liking or subscribing. I really do appreciate it. Right, we've been here long enough. Until next time.